Welcome to Your Voice, a New Jersey public policy program of the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Ministry of New Jersey. UULMNJ is dedicated to providing a voice for justice, equality, and compassion, and to raising the ethical and moral questions related to our state's social and legislative issues. My name is Reverend Craig Hirschberg. I am the Executive Director of UULMNJ and host for this program. The series of educational programs will explore important social issues facing New Jersey, including economic justice, mass incarceration, environmental sustainability, immigration, and many others. Today, we are exploring economic justice through the lens of affordable housing and the dynamics of poverty and how we may advocate for change. Our guests are Joyce Campbell, Associate Executive Director for External Affairs for Catholic Charities. Joyce is also the Vice Chair of the Anti-Poverty Network of New Jersey and is a licensed clinical social worker. She has over 30 years of professional experience in community social services, mental health, and healthcare environments. And she has dedicated her career to reducing the impact of poverty on families and individuals. Our other guest is Reverend Eric Dobson, co-founder of Open Communities and the founder of Planting Seeds of Hope. He is the outreach coordinator for FairShare Housing Center, and he has extensive experience working with diverse communities. He specializes in interfaith outreach, tackling issues that address the interconnection of race, ethnicity, and socioeconomics. I want to thank you both for being with us today. It's a delight to have such experienced and knowledgeable people to be on this show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes. I'd like to begin and ask each of you to just tell us a little bit about your understanding of economic justice and poverty concern. And maybe we'll start with you, Reverend Dobson. What are your thoughts about poverty and economic justice? And are there current policies that you think entrap people in poverty? And based from what you've learned in affordable housing, are there systematic problems that are creating one from not being able to find a path out of poverty?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that happens when we're dealing with those who are trapped in poverty, I call it trapped in poverty because they're trying to find ways to find housing that's affordable for them. Housing where they're not using most of their income to pay for housing expenses. So here in New Jersey, there are particular ways that we have done historically and trap people in poverty in New Jersey is use zoning to exclude low income, moderate income, or working class folks to move in higher opportunity neighborhoods. So what we try to do is explain to people the importance of dealing with zoning that excludes people, dealing with zoning that discriminates against low income, seniors, special need individuals, moderate income folks who simply are being priced out of New Jersey because the cost of living, the cost of housing is so expensive. So that's one of the main issues. And we know housing is one of the ways historically in America where we've accumulated wealth for individuals. But unfortunately, low-income folks haven't had that opportunity because they just simply can't afford to live in communities where their housing values will increase and they'll have that benefit of having accumulated wealth through upward mobility. So that's one of the struggles here in New Jersey. And I would say that's a policy. Exclusionary zoning is a policy that keeps people keep people trapped in poverty.
Mm-hmm. And any other things that you could say might be preventing a path to poverty that might be?
I think one of the other areas of prevent people from a path out of poverty is particularly segregation. I think that is the biggest problem here in America and New Jersey, period. We are a segregated society, segregated economically, socially, personally. And so that, in many ways, is one of the things that we've talked about this in years past about ways to deal with segregation. And many people here in the country think we've desegregated. But there's a difference between desegregation and integration. Mm-hmm. So desegregation are laws that outlaw, laws that instituted to force people to not exclude people based upon race. integration is really a choice for people to make a decision and say, you know what, I want to live in integrated communities. I want to work with those who are from different race, different ethnicities. I want to worship with people of different ethnic groups. I want to socialize with them. I want my kids to interact with those. I want my kids to be educated in integrated schools.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, we haven't made that choice in this country. Some communities have, and particularly a community not far from here. Glen Acres is a community who have done that. South Orange, Maplewood has a community, has intentionally integrated. Westmount area in Philadelphia, but here in America, we haven't really tried integration. So we've desegregated, but not tried integration. So that left many of minorities, people of color, low-income folks, trapped into communities where they are highly concentrated in high poverty areas. And so that's part of the problem here in America. And it's very expensive to live in a country that continues to segregate its society. Expensive to live in wealthier communities, and expensive to keep all the services and the things that we have to keep, to allocate resources for, whether it's high crime, whether it's healthcare, whether it's all those things that come, the social issues that comes with high concentrations of poverty. It costs us, the country, a lot of money, opposed to a more economical way is to create integrated communities. So.
Very good points. Joyce, I'm going to ask maybe your turn now just a little bit. After years of service working for charitable organizations and working in impoverished communities, what are your thoughts about poverty and economic justice, and how has that work brought you to the work you're doing now, which is really a lot of advocacy?
Yes, actually, probably even in my childhood, I think kind of brought me to these issues. I was always keenly aware of people living in poverty, having friends who didn't have the things that I had, and as a child, not really understanding that and really feeling compassionate and empathy about that. And I think that's probably what led me to a career in social work. And so I have been in a variety of areas of social work over the years, and all the populations I have worked with have been impoverished, from seriously mentally ill to physically handicapped, to working in food pantries and doing homeless prevention and transitional housing. So it has really been the focus.
You've seen a lot.
I have done a lot, yes.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that really led me more to advocacy was probably about 10, 12 years ago. And really, I think a lot of it over housing and not having housing opportunities. When I worked directly at Catholic Charities in our community services program, we would run out of money to help people with back rent, to prevent them becoming homeless, which is a much more expensive thing to do than prevent it. We'd run out of money, and people would call, what can you do? Why can't you help us? It's only so much funding. Call your legislator. So for me, one of the ways of getting involved more in advocacy in the social justice piece came out of a frustration of seeing people living in poverty and the resources not being here, especially in such a wealthy country. I always say I don't understand it. I mean, I do understand it intellectually, but I really don't accept the fact that we can't have better solutions for folks who are living in poverty. I think the other thing that I've seen that is really critical is for people to actually to sort of balance on 2 feet. There's a foot for charity, which is providing food and items and really kind of the immediate, sort of the Band-Aid. But if you just stand on 1 foot, you're not going to be, you're going to lose your balance eventually. So really the other foot, of social justice is really taking a look at further down, not just writing a check, but what is going on in our society? What are the policies? What are the structures? You've mentioned several things, in terms of integration, desegregation. What have we done over the years, and how have we continued to perpetuate some of the situations by policies that we make? So it's a balance of both. We can't stop doing the charity, but really try to help to move people onto the other foot as well. I think it's scary for people, but I think that once they learn about what it means to advocate, it's not as scary anymore.
Could you go in what you mean by scary? How do you think it might be scary?
Well, I think, and I've seen it in lots of places, that, I don't want to be involved in politics. And the word politics really is about the art and science of government. I mean, it's gotten all these negative things attached to it, certainly in most recent years, where people also think about politics as lobbying, which it's really not. And advocacy is used to help influence policy, but it's used in a way to educate and to inform. That's really, and to tell the story. I have to say that's probably the biggest thing. Tell the story, either very impactful if you're someone who's lived in poverty or had trouble getting housing that's affordable, to be able to tell their story, to talk about the numbers of people that don't have that. That's just primarily what it's about. So it's really not very scary. I know when I first started, I was kind of intimidated about, talking to elected officials, and no longer. Yeah, they do listen.
They need to hear our voices
Right,
too. I think
exactly.
that's the other thing, that they can kind of sometimes live in an area where it is just politics, and they need to hear the human side. I was going to ask you, Reverend Dobson, we were talking about different stories. Well, there are different kinds of affordable housing. I wondered if you could go in a little bit about what are the distinctions and different kinds of affordable housing, and who best fits into which of those distinctions, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think when you hear the term affordable housing, all type of images or ideas come up. Affordable housing encompasses what we call Section 8 housing, which is a voucher program administered through HUD that gives it to each state. So the Housing Urban Community Development gives it to each state, and they administer it as a voucher program. Vouchers allow people to make a choice to whether they can move around to find residents that they like in different communities. Then you have the low-income housing as well. That is usually for those who are working, who are not making enough to afford rent. And sometimes you have people on fixed incomes like seniors, as well as special need individuals who are considered low-income individuals as well. So those are the different types of housing when we talk about affordable housing. And the term affordable housing, it gets very confusing because people seem to think that it's just for low-income people, minorities, but it's actually affordable housing, particularly here in New Jersey, depends on the area median income. So depending on what county you are, what county you live in, teacher, firefighter, a policeman can qualify for affordable housing. Affordable housing is just a term used really that says housing that's affordable. And that's really that in a nutshell. So sometimes this is misperception about affordable housing is just for low income folks. Well, it's actually for working class individuals. It's really designed to allow those who live in their communities, who work in the community, also to live in that community. So it could be a teacher, a firefighter, it could be a librarian, someone who wants to live in a community where there's high opportunities, good schools, safe neighborhoods. And so they're afforded the opportunity. So it's not as what some people would think. There's a perception, sometimes a negative stigma around housing that's affordable. So depending on what region you're in, you can be a working class individual making decent money, but really can't afford to stay in your community. So then, you would apply for affordable housing. That's kind of ironic, but yes, housing that's affordable for me to stay, to live and work in my community. So.
Well, I think, Joyce, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember a statistic that in order to afford a moderate or a modest two-bedroom apartment in New Jersey, you need an income of $65,000, I think.
I think it's close to that.
Yeah.
In the state, it varies again because of median income. But there is a group, the National Low Income Housing Coalition, that each year puts out an out of reach report that figures by state and then by county what does it take in an hourly wage to comfortably afford to rent a two-bedroom apartment. And when you say comfortably afford, it's the same as the affordability, which is 30% of your income. And so many folks are what they're called housing burden because they're paying 50, 60, 70% of their income, which then sets off a whole thing for them in terms of, okay, well, now their car is broken and this and that. And I have to say, I mean, since I started at Catholic Charities, I started there in 1996, and we had so many people I thought coming into the food pantry, and I'm like, why is this happening? And to me, it's very clear that the lack of housing that people can afford and then pay for all their other expenses really drove them there. And unfortunately, those numbers have only increased. So I think that, it's really being realistic about what does it take to live in the state of New Jersey. And there's several reports that have figured that out, but it is frightening to think of the hourly wage because in New Jersey, it's almost now up to 3 times the new minimum wage. I don't think anybody has the physical capability to work 3 full-time jobs.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't housing be affordable if more people, for more people, if they had more education and training and earned more? I mean, is that the solution, or how does it work?
It's a very nice idea to think that everybody would be trained and educated to have jobs to make enough money to afford living here in New Jersey. However, that's not really reality. And part of the issue is, and Reverend Dobson, you had mentioned, people wanting to live in their community, teachers, firefighters. They're not paid enough to do that, but we need them. We need everybody. We need fast food workers. And just because you're working at a job that is not given the value monetarily as others, doesn't mean you shouldn't have a nice place to live and have a roof over your head. So I think that it's good to have those programs for people who can do that. But if somebody works really hard taking care of my child in a daycare center and loves their job, they should be able to still afford a place to live.
Yeah. And New Jersey is lacking a lot of this kind of housing.
Yes.
We're just really not meeting our responsibilities.
Yes.
Some people say that investing in reducing poverty could actually spur our economy. Do you believe that? And
Yes, I
tell
do.
me how does that work?
Well, I think it kind of starts when you talk about some of the things when you don't invest, say, even in affordable housing, more people are homeless. Homelessness costs much more. Several years back, when we did some advocacy work to establish the state rental assistance program, I remember at the time, quoting some figures that for emergency shelter for a year, say, was like $25,000. Transitional housing was, say, $16,000. A voucher was like $7,000 or $8,000. And the stability that it would lead to is great. So then you have money kind of freed up. The other part is that when people are they're paying 30%, which is kind of the standard, they have other money to invest in the economy, to go out and purchase things. When people have SNAP, which is was formerly food stamps, every $5 that they spend in those doubles what goes into the economy. Earned income tax credits, another program that, again, puts money back into the economy because most of these folks don't have so much extra money that they can save it. They're probably going to spend it and then maybe rely less on some of the programs that are out there to help them. So I think it's really a misnomer to think that there's not some benefit to the economy.
Thank you. And one more question about housing. Does it matter where affordable housing is?
This is a very, very important point. I think we saw that the effects of affordable housing being concentrated in one particular region or one particular neighborhood community. And what you're doing is you're just concentrating poverty if you're putting all low-income folks in one particular area. So real estate is the same with whether you're in low-income housing or affordable housing or not. It's all location. So it's important for affordable housing to be in higher opportunity neighborhoods. And what I mean by higher opportunity neighborhoods are neighborhoods where you have good schools, good social services, jobs are available, transportation. So these are some of the things that we try to advocate. We're just saying put in affordable housing in low-income neighborhoods where the land is not as valued as other neighborhoods. It's not a solution. It's actually compounding the problem. It's actually concentrating poverty and creating more of the social programs that we're trying to rid ourselves of in this country. So one of the ways that we try to advocate is put affordable housing or working force housing or low-income housing, and it's a mix. You don't want to have all low-income housing in one area. You want to have working class folks, those who have middle income, as well as low income people living and working in the same community. So it's very, very important to make sure you have affordable housing in communities where there are higher opportunities for education, good education, employment, access to transportation, access to good health care. That's very important. So that it does matter greatly where the affordable housing is located.
Do you have any examples of places where it's working really well, and what are some of the things they learned in these communities?
It's a great question because New Jersey has several communities that I mentioned earlier. One community, South Orange and Maplewood, has intentionally integrated their communities and wanted to make sure that community is a community that keeps all the working class, middle income, low income folks working together, black, white. It didn't matter what ethnic group you were from. It was important to keep a holistic community together. Glen Acres is a community not far from here that has historically worked on intentional integration, keeping the community together. West Monterey in Philadelphia, Oak Park out by Chicago is another historically community that worked on intentionally creating integrated communities. Pensacola, New Jersey was another town that worked on intentional integration. So there are pockets of communities around the country, and these communities need to be highlighted to show the success that they're having. We're keeping middle income, low income, different people from all ethnic groups working, living, educating their children in the same community, and how successful it is. And there are studies and statistics show that when children are educated in integrated schools, they tend to do better. When they're exposed to different ethnic groups, they're much more holistic prepared to enter a global society because we're competing now with the global community. So the more our children are exposed to different cultures, the more easy it is for them to handle working with people, living with people, shopping with people. So integrated communities is something that I believe that is worthwhile, not only for socially, but for economically. It makes economic sense, opposed to what we're doing now, just keep separating ourselves by race, class, and gender. And we pay a high price for it. And so, unfortunately, we haven't learned that lesson yet.
No, we're slow learners on this, aren't we? We're very slow learners. Well, one thing I have, my final question for both of you, and this is a big one. You know, we're doing these programs to help people understand what the issues are so that they can go out and advocate in some way. What are some ways, what are some things people could be doing to help address poverty, lack of enough affordable housing issues in New Jersey? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one thing is to choose one particular area. I mean, poverty is very complex. And I think that housing, though, is having housing people can afford, in my opinion, is very critical. So maybe you pick that particular area to learn a little about it. There's a lot of information, different reports, different models of communities. And one of the things to do really is not only to educate yourself, educate people that you know, but clearly also to be involved with those who, legislate and write the policy and implement it and put the dollars to it, and really bring that information. I mean, many of our local, state, and federal elected officials, a lot of them, they don't know the details of what's going on back home all the time. Some, of course, are more, again, because they have their own passions, but everyone has a right and really a responsibility, if there's something that they believe is not just, to speak with their elected officials about it and let them know. But I think one of the best things that we can do is bring models that have worked, You know, one of the major issues always is something going to cost more money. It doesn't always cost more money
That's right.
in the
That's
long
right.
run. And I think that, you know, to be able to demonstrate that sometimes is helpful. But I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to have their voices heard.
Mm.
You know.
I would agree with Joyce, and I think it's important for people to educate themselves about the true facts and not listen to propaganda that's out there. Like, one of the things that people say, well, it costs more to do affordable housing, when actually towns don't pay for affordable housing. There's an affordable housing trust fund that developers pay, so the taxpayers don't pay for affordable housing. There's already resources there to cover the expense of affordable housing. So,
Could you explain that a little bit more?
sure. When a town wants to do affordable housing, or a developer comes into town, that developer, whether he's building a new supermarket, a new Home Depot, Best Buys, whatever it is, in order to develop that particular building he's building, he pays an affordable housing. He pays into the trust fund. So part of his fees goes into a trust fund to build affordable housing. In New Jersey, we have millions of dollars in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, almost $250 million currently in New Jersey's Affordable Housing Trust Fund that is there to build affordable housing. New Jersey has just been finding ways not to do it. So that's why we have a problem of a shortage of housing that's affordable, because New Jersey just doesn't want to do it. So regular communities, local communities don't pay for affordable housing. The developers pay for it. So that the money is there and the resources is there to do it. And so those are some of the things that people just inform themselves about the true facts, and not assuming that what they hear on television or what they hear on the news, or even that their local mayors may not know indeed how much money their community have in their affordable housing trust fund. Sometimes our mayors are, elected officials, they work 2 jobs. It's not their full-time job, so they're not sure exactly what's going on in their own coffers. So sometimes it's just asking the right question. And when you get an answer, to dig into that answer, because it's not necessarily what they say, the devil's in the details. So those are some of the things I think people just try to get more informed about these issues and not assume that what you hear on the news is correct.
So what we're saying is that it's important to educate ourselves. It's important to advocate to officials. I also think it's probably important to organize, to connect with other like-minded people who are just as concerned as we are about poverty and affordable housing in New Jersey, and really create coalitions even that would help.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we do have an anti-poverty network in the state that really brings together, I think we have close to maybe 100 different organizations who are involved in really kind of, because it's a complex issue, trying to look at a variety, of issues that make up poverty, problems with housing, hunger, education, a variety of them. So that is a group that's clearly ready organized, at least statewide, but I know a lot of organizing that's effective really takes place on a very local level as well. So.
Well, I think we've just about run out of time. I want to thank you both so much for helping us understand the issues of affordable housing and poverty in New Jersey. Clearly, these issues are more complex than we could ever cover in one series, one program, but I thank you for at least beginning to educate the public about it. We hope our listeners will continue to educate themselves and become more involved in eradicating poverty as well, and bringing about a more just economic society. Through the collective actions of concerned citizens like those who are seeing this presentation, social change can happen. And so we join us, please, in making this change possible. These programs are services of the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Ministry of New Jersey, a nonprofit, faith-based organization supported by Unitarian Universalist congregations throughout the state. For more information about this and our other advocacy programs, please go to www.yuulmnj.org. Thank you.